Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the right moment, full clarity, ideal readiness. They believe that one day, without warning, something inside will switch on and everything will finally change. As if true transformation came from the outside in, as if motivation preceded discipline. But time passes, cycles repeat, and frustration grows in silence. Because that perfect moment never arrives. And the more you wait for it, the more distant it seems. Deep down, there is a common and very subtle belief that one day you'll wake up different, with more strength, more courage, more motivation, and only then will you begin to change. But that rarely happens. The truth is that no one becomes stable through a sudden flash of insight. What exists in practice is training. And what sustains inner control is not inspiration, it's repetition. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He ruled an empire surrounded by chaos, yet maintained a disciplined personal routine, not out of rigidity, but out of necessity. He did not wait for the world to calm down in order to find order. He created that order through his own practice. Many people confuse waiting with preparation. They say they are not ready to change, when in reality, they are just afraid to start small. But it is precisely that modest, almost invisible beginning that builds what matters most. Because discipline is not born of strength, but of repeated choice. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop depending on external things and start training what is within your control. The key was never feeling ready. The key has always been taking responsibility, even when nothing seems to cooperate. This talk is about that, about stopping the wait for a signal, a miracle, a moment, and beginning to build with what you have, just as you are, without demanding emotional perfection, without romanticizing life changes, but trusting that discipline, even when quiet, is the most direct path to self-mastery. Because whoever builds routine with intention also builds freedom. It's easy to believe that living according to your mood is a sign of freedom, that following your intuition, letting sensations guide you, means you are in contact with who you really are. But emotional reality for someone who lives that way is often unstable, because on good days, everything seems to work. There is focus, patience, self-control. But as soon as your internal climate shifts, the promises you made to yourself begin to collapse. Life becomes an invisible roller coaster where consistency seems unreachable. This instability isn't a flaw, it's a pattern. The brain naturally seeks comfort. It avoids sustained effort. It prefers immediate pleasure over quiet commitment. And this is why waiting until you feel like it to act is one of the most expensive habits someone can maintain. Marcus Aurelius didn't treat discipline like punishment, but like mental hygiene. He wrote, reflected, and organized his thoughts even on days when nothing seemed to cooperate. Not out of rigidity, but for clarity. He knew that a mind without care loses itself in the day's chaos. You've lived this. On a calm day, you accomplish everything you set out to do. But add a poor night's sleep, an unresolved irritation, or an unexpected frustration, and suddenly everything feels too hard. That's when true discipline shows up. When you keep your commitments even when there is no enthusiasm. When you don't negotiate with yourself about what you know sustains your clarity. This doesn't mean doing a lot. It means defining minimal practices that repeat with purpose. Small things that signal to your brain that there is direction. It might be writing 2 sentences in the morning, breathing with intention before bed, or reminding yourself of a Stoic principle in traffic. These are small details, but together They build a foundation, and over time, the effect becomes clear. You stop depending on motivation to stay firm, and you begin to live with greater emotional stability, even on days that look rough externally. Because inside, the foundation is already being cultivated. Many people postpone important changes while waiting for a moment when everything makes sense, as if emotional clarity came before action, as if at some point on the path, a quiet certainty would appear, opening space for ideal behavior. But the mind doesn't work that way. It's not light that precedes movement. It is movement, repeated quietly, that lights up small points along the way. For years, you may have waited for that right impulse. The day you will wake up different, more ready, more clear, more capable. But most of the time, that day never arrives, because transformation does not come from an emotional leap, but from small, consistent gestures that repeat the decision even without desire. Epictetus said that correct action must happen before stable emotion, because to act well is not to feel right, it is to sustain what matters even when you don't feel like it. You've probably experienced this conflict. You understand everything rationally. You know what needs to be done. You've read, you've talked, you've reflected. But when it comes time to sustain the behavior, something fails. Motivation disappears, and willingness gives way to inertia. This isn't weakness. It's simply the effect of expecting motivation to lead change, when in reality, motivation should be a result, not a prerequisite. For that reason, practice needs to begin before readiness, with simple, almost invisible gestures, getting out of bed on time even when the mind negotiates, keeping your commitment without drama, repeating the behavior even when your body does not cooperate. These small, daily movements build something stronger than enthusiasm: consistency. And when consistency takes root, self-control begins to emerge. Without force, it just appears, as a quiet result of practicing discipline before you feel ready. Many people spend their lives waiting for a big breakthrough, believing that at some point something external will happen, a meeting, a conversation, an event, as if change were something that comes from outside, ready to fix what's inside. But the truth is that transformation doesn't arrive, it is built. And those who wait too much often forget to begin. Marcus Aurelius is a clear symbol of this truth. His steadiness was not the result of a single moment of illumination. It was cultivated day by day, on the pages he wrote for himself, in the principles he reaffirmed in the midst of chaos. He knew that discipline is not a prison. It is the space where real freedom can grow. Because whoever disciplines themselves sustains themselves, and whoever sustains themselves does not depend on emotional miracles. Epictetus said that mastery is born not of hope, but of training. He reminds us that you don't need to become someone else to live better. You simply need to act like someone who has already chosen, and repeat that, without spectacle, without needing to feel special. Just a quiet commitment to what you already know is right. Discipline, then, becomes an act of respect, not for an ideal of perfection, but for the person you decide to be. It does not require that you change who you are, only that you honor who you are, that you don't betray what you know even on difficult days, that you repeat what matters even without applause. Because in the end, it isn't about waiting for a new you, it's about sustaining, with dignity, the you have already chosen to build. And when that decision is maintained quietly, without haste, without anxiety for results, something begins to change. Not outwardly, but inwardly. Life then stops being an anxious wait for transformation. It becomes a continuous act of governance, because those who stop waiting finally begin to govern their own lives.